Welcome to Jazz Time. Jazz Time is an online store that buys, sells, and trades authentic luxury watches. We make these videos so our customers can easily choose the best watch for themselves in the comfort of their own home. If you like this watch, click the link in the description below to buy it at the lowest price anywhere online. If you like this video or want to see other videos like this, click on the subscribe button below. Today, I'm going to be reviewing the Patek Philippe, reference 5226G-001 Calatrava. I'm going to talk to you guys about the case, the dial, the bezel, the movement, the strap, try it on, and give you my thoughts, and also tell you a little bit of history about this watch. So, let's get started. Let's start here with the case. The case is made out of white gold and the diameter is 40 millimeters. That's the longest distance across the watch, going from the 8 o'clock to 2 o'clock spanning the bezel. That distance is 40 millimeters. Now, to give you some reference, 40 millimeters is an average size for a dress watch. And nowadays, actually, even sports watches, 40 millimeters is your typical size. 36 millimeters would be considered small. And that used to be the norm, but now it's considered small. And 44 millimeters would be considered a large size. Patek does make some watches at 44 millimeters, but they're the grand complication. Most of their watches stop at 42 millimeters, which is still big for a watch, but 40 millimeters is a medium size. And the reason I tell you this is because the size of the watch is very important when it comes to selecting yours. You want to choose a watch that is neither too big nor too small. It's like choosing a pair of shoes or a backpack or a car. You want to have the right backpack for the right situation. You don't want to have a gigantic backpack in all situations, just like you don't want to have a backpack that's too small. Now, on this watch, it depends on what you're wearing it for, but most of us would be wearing this watch for a dress situation, perhaps even in a casual situation, but we like it to fit. That's the most important thing, at least in my opinion, that the watch fits and looks good on you because, after all, that's the whole purpose of the watch. To have a beautiful watch that actually fits and looks good on you. And in order to do that, the size has to be correct. So 40 millimeters is a very good medium size. Okay, that's the diameter. Now let's turn it on its size and look at its height. The height, or profile, is the distance that it sticks up above your wrist and to the top of the watch. And that distance on this watch is only 8.53 millimeters. Call it 8.5 millimeters. Now, just for some reference, that is very, very thin. Remarkably thin, in fact. To give you some reference on that, if you look at the Royal Oak, one of their thinnest Royal Oaks is about 8 millimeters. If you look at the Patek Nautilus, their thinnest Nautilus is about 8 millimeters as well. And this one is right in line with that. It doesn't really get much thinner than 8 millimeters. Now that's kind of a good thing and a little bit of a bad thing. It's a good thing in the sense that it fits easily in your cuff and it feels streamlined with your body and your wrist. But in some ways, it's not that much of a good thing because it doesn't have much heft. It doesn't have that much weight to it, and it doesn't feel substantial in that sense. But Patek is known for making these watches very thin. So it makes sense that they would make this watch to be very thin, and also this watch does not have any complications. It's simply time and date. And it's using a very common movement that Patek has been using. So it just makes sense that this watch would be a very, very thin watch at 8.5 millimeters. Now, Patek only makes this watch in one configuration. It's the configuration you see here, as it's the only one, in white gold. Now, you might wonder, why wouldn't they make it in platinum or rose gold? Well, they certainly might, but they'll probably have to change the dial configuration. But at the moment, at least as of 2023, they only have this configuration. And did I mention that this watch was released in 2022? So it is a fairly new watch. Okay, so that is the case. Actually, I do still want to talk about the case a little bit. What is interesting about this case, well, aside from it being a very good size, there's actually no other watch, aside from its big brother, which we'll get to in a second, that has this specific case. Now, why would I say this? Because Patek oftentimes uses the same case or similar cases in many of its different models. So this case is completely new to them. And well, how do you know that? Well, they've actually used these sorts of lugs before. I don't know how you would call them, but as you see, these lugs have this triangle tip at the end. The lugs are not particularly revolutionary, but what is revolutionary is that on this case is that you see the middle case. Let me turn it on the side. The middle case has what Patek calls a Cloud de Paris hobnail pattern. Let's just call it a hobnail pattern. In this pattern, it goes around the middle of the case. You don't see that on any other Patek. This is the first time they have ever done that. And this hobnail, to give it some historical reference, in Calatrava, Patek has done hobnails on the bezel. They usually do the hobnail on the bezel, which is the thing that goes around the dial, but they don't do it in the middle of the case. Usually, they leave the middle of the case flat. This is the first time they've ever put designs on the side like this, especially a hobnail. And I think that is very cool. So they reversed it. Usually you put the hobnail on the bezel and then you leave the side of it flat. Here, they've completely switched it. They've left the bezel completely flat and they put the hobnail on its side. I'm not sure why they did that, but I will tell you one practical application of that is that the bezel is the part of the watch that is most likely to be destroyed or beat up. And if you put the hobnail, which is the most delicate part, on the side of the case as opposed to the bezel, then it prevents that from happening. So it could be that practical reason why they did that. At any rate, I think it looks beautiful. And I would imagine most of us would agree. The only other Patek that has this type of side case is the big brother, the 5326G. This is the 5226G. And its older brother, the bigger brother, has a similar case. I was telling you guys earlier, the lugs are not really that different. The regulator Patek, the 5235, also has similar lugs like this, these triangle lugs that are not rounded. So it's not that revolutionary, at least in this case. Now, let's move on to the next thing, which is the dial. I think the dial is also quite interesting. What do you notice about this dial? Well, several things. A lot of things, actually. And I think that's what really makes this watch, if you ask me, the dial. And actually, the dial is what you're looking at 80% of the time. So it's a very important part of the watch. In fact, it's probably the most important part of the watch, which is why they spent so much time and effort to make it really stand out. And what are some of the features that I think really stand out? Well, first of all, this texture of the dial is very special. It looks like a vintage camera, the part of the camera that you grab. I don't really know what that part of the camera is called, but the rubber part. It looks like an old vintage camera, and it gives this old vintage look, just like the dial has a funky metallic tarmac look. I've never seen this on any other watch. Patek has never done it on any one of their watches, so it's a first for many things. And that's what I think really makes this watch so special. Had they done this dial in a flat color, just like a flat black or gray, I don't think it would have hit like this. But the fact that this dial is so special, it has that beautiful vintage look, it really makes this watch a top watch in my opinion. Now, what are some other things you might have noticed? Well, I also noticed that it slightly looks lighter in the center and it gets darker towards the periphery. And I also believe they've done that on purpose to add to that vintage look. They could have just simply made a beautiful dial with this funky pattern on it and just left it at that. But they decided, no, we're going to make the center bright and the edges dark. Another really cool thing to add some contrast and depth to the dial, which I believe they really succeeded. Now, what else? Let's look at those hour markers. Some people might not pay that much attention to the hour markers. You might say, well, whatever, it's just luminescence 1 through 12. Well, actually, no. Patek has really designed a watch that is continuous throughout. And what I mean by that is if you look at the loom hands, or the loom on the hour markers and the hour minute hand, they're not actually white like they normally are. They're yellow or a faded off-white. In other words, like a vintage white, a white that's been sitting around so long that it's become cream-colored. And why do you think they've done that? Well, I think they've done that to add a continuous vintage look that the dial already has, and to reinforce that by making the hour markers and the hands in that same cream vintage color. I think it's genius, actually. And what else they've done? They've made the periphery dark, so it makes the hour markers contrast with the dark even more so. Make sense? So I think that they really hit it on the head when it comes to design of the dial, which is, as I said before, I believe it makes this watch. Without this dial, this watch probably would not do very well at all. It probably would sell under retail. Okay, another thing, I know I'm picking every little thing apart here, but look at the hands. Patek has not used these kinds of hands on any other Calatrava. Now you might say, who cares? What's the big deal about these hands? These hands, what do they remind you of? They look like a syringe. You see that the lume is where the medicine would be, and the long pointy thing is where the needle would be. So they call these syringe hands. These are old school hands. There's only one other watch that uses this aside from its big brother, and it's the Patek chronograph, manual wind, reference 5172. That watch also uses these syringe hands, which gives it another layer to the vintage look. So they really tried their best to make this watch look as vintage as possible by making the dial have this texture, the hour hands, the hour markers, the hands, and they made the hands look vintage. So in every way, this watch looks vintage, and it looks fantastic if you ask me. So that's the dial. Now let's move on to the movement. The movement can be seen through this exhibition caseback, and it's your typical, which is not a bad thing, typical beautiful Patek movement. It has a caliber 26-3330 SC, has a diameter of 27 millimeters, has 212 parts, a power reserve of 35 hours, and a lot of other stuff to it. I can't say that this is an amazing movement. It fits the watch. It does look a little bit small to me, but it's still, of course, a beautiful Patek movement. But it's not amazing. There are other better ones, but this is the most basic watch that Patek makes that only has date and time. So you really can't expect too much out of the movement that just does the basic things. So that's the movement. I am glad that you could see it through the back though. And it's actually used a lot on their other watches. It's even used on their Nautilus. So it's not a bad movement. It's a very, very good movement. Now, moving on, let's talk about the strap here. Now, Patek's including two kinds of straps with this. The first one is their nubuck, which is what you see here, and it's a suede leather, a calf skin. It's beige, as you can see here, and it's hand-stitched. And again, it matches the hour markers and gives the watch that added vintage look. It really matches, I believe, with the rest of the watch. So Patek has thought this through. A lot of times you'll see on their other watches, they'll simply throw a strap on there. Oh, well, let's just put a black alligator on there. And you're like, what? Why would you put a black alligator on that? For example, if you look at the Patek regulator, they just simply put a black strap on it. Look at the annual calendar moon phase or annual calendar chronograph 5905. They put black crocodile on it. They couldn't think of something better. It doesn't really match the rest of the watch. That was back then. Those watches were created a few years ago. Now this one was created in 2022. Patek has decided to make the strap and the case one to make it all match, which I think was a great idea. Patek also included a second strap, which is a black strap. And you might actually think that this is just a black strap, one that looks canvas. Actually, it's not a canvas strap. It's a calfskin strap embossed with a fabric pattern. So think about that. It's leather made to look like canvas. That's kind of cool. So you're actually still wearing a leather strap. It just looks like a canvas strap. And again, it matches the watch perfectly. The pattern on the dial matches the pattern on the strap, and it lends to a very continuous look throughout the entire watch, and it's flowing. Now, the strap itself uses a prong buckle or a pin buckle, as you can see. It's kind of what you're used to seeing on your belt. On the older brother, the 5326, it uses a deployment case. On this one, it uses a pin buckle. I kind of like the pin buckle. It's simple and it doesn't open on accident. A deployment buckle can open on accident. So I have talked about every part of this watch now. Now let me try it on and give you my thoughts. And also to give a little background history, as I said at the beginning of the video. I'm 200 pounds, I'm 6 feet tall, and this watch is 40 millimeters, 8 millimeters in height, and it fits perfectly on me. I think it looks fantastic. It's hard to say it's one of my favorite Pateks because Patek is such a great brand. They make so many amazing watches, but I definitely like this watch. It's not my personal favorite, but I do like it. I definitely like it. And I think for the price, the retail price is around $40,000, at least as of this moment, a little bit above retail. And by the way, if you do want to buy this watch at the lowest price anywhere online, click the link in the description below and buy it at jazztime.com. So my thoughts are that this is a very cool vintage style Patek, and it's not super expensive, being around $40,000 or so. And it can be worn in lots of situations, mostly casual, I would say. I would imagine you wearing jeans, a sweater, or shorts, any kind of casual thing. It's not a sports watch, but it's still very casual. Khakis, loafers. I don't think this watch would be worn with a suit or any kind of formal wear. I think it's still very much a more casual watch. So for what it is, I think it looks awesome. And I think if you try to compare it to something, what are other watches? There's not a lot of watches in this category with this vintage. I'll put it in the vintage category. So there's not a lot of other watches with this same category, and I think Patek really hit it on the head. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10 and probably only reserve the 9 out of 10 for its bigger brother, the 5326. Thanks for watching, and if you want to buy this watch, again, go to jazztime.com.
If you want to find out more about the watch you just saw in the video, you can just click below on Show More to see the full description. Then you can check the link next to model as seen in video, click on it and you will get to the proper page where you can see all the details. If you're watching on a mobile phone, you have to click on the arrow down on the right hand side below the video to see the full description. If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. If you would like to share this video with your friends, you can use the share button below and share it on any platform you like. If you have questions, constructive feedback, want to tell us about some mistakes or misspeaks, just write a comment below. If you want to see more videos like this, you should subscribe to our channel and visit our channel page where you can find all the videos. And if you're interested in a specific watch brand, you can check out our playlists. If you want to check the price for a watch or want to buy one, remember at jazztime.com you always get a steep discount, so you should check the prices with us. If you want to know the price for a specific watch, just go to Google, type in JazzTime, plus the brand, model and the details you're interested in, and Google will find the right page for you. Thank you for watching.